most of the BioDAOs we've seen so far, the assumption of value has been like, we're going to make patents, we're going to somehow commercialize the patents, and then somehow that's going to cause the number to go up when we buy back the stock or tokens or whatever.
Hi, everyone. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to my amazing Supercast subscribers. Your continued support means the world to me. As a Supercast member, you get exclusive access to the unfiltered, ad-free video versions of our Health Unchained interviews. Raw, real, and packed with insights. You're not just supporting the show, you're fueling the conversations at the cutting edge of healthcare and blockchain innovation. So thank you for being a vital part of this journey. If you're interested in joining, you can learn more about Supercast in the episode description.
Hi, I'm your host, Ray Dogan, and welcome to Health Unchained. On this show, I will be speaking with healthcare entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and executives who are using blockchain technologies to revolutionize healthcare. These innovators are building the distributed infrastructure and diverse communities required for a trusted, secure, and decentralized healthcare ecosystem. Enjoy the show.
What is blockchain?
Was ist Blockchain?
What is blockchain?
The doctor will see you now.
Remember, the Health Unchained podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and we are not providing any sort of legal, financial, or medical advice. Please do your own research and due diligence before making any important decisions related to these matters. And now, please enjoy episode 125 of Health Unchained.
Welcome to Health Unchained. Today's guest is Tristan Roberts. He's the founder of a new DAO focused on canine longevity called Dog Years. We're here to talk about why and how a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization for dogs, can work in the DeSci space and how it might help the bigger problem of proving longevity claims in humans. Tristan co-founded the gene therapy startup Minicircle and manages the Research Collective, a Telegram community bridging the biohacker and DeSci spaces, which I've been a part of for many years now. Thank you for managing and hosting that group, Tristan. I'm so happy to have you on here today. It's been a long time since we first talked about having you on, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Why don't we get started with you introducing yourself?
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, I've been looking forward to coming on the show for a while. Thanks for getting the information out there on this new field. Oh, where to begin? I studied cognitive neuroscience. I got into IT. I realized that the current trajectory for technological unemployment looked really bad. And by that, I mean like half of the kids in my class were programmers and the other half were underemployed. The whole point of the programmers is to get rid of the other jobs. And I was like, ooh, this is not a sustainable trajectory. Something's going to give. And so that got me back into basic income back in like 2016, around that era. And that got me into early network state stuff where we're like, why don't we just make a government? Why don't we just make our own currency? Why don't we make a DAO? But it was honestly kind of before DAOs were viable. It was kind of like a good Slack room with a lot of good ideas, not a lot of good implementation. But through that community, I was introduced to some biohackers. Some of them were working on a gene therapy for HIV. I had recently lost my insurance, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I think the current system sucks. I kind of want to test some things out. And that got me catapulted into this position of citizen scientist / advocate for gene modification and radical self-experimentation. The initial company failed, but some of my friends, colleagues were able to keep going and spin it out, and that eventually became Minicircle. And lately, I've been looking at how do we potentially get their treatment to market, because I think they have a legitimate treatment, but it's hard to get a gene therapy approved in the United States, as you can probably imagine. And so lately I've been thinking about, well, maybe a spin out could be a solution that targets canines.
Thanks for sharing all that background. I want to kind of address a couple things. You were one of the first people to actually receive gene therapy back in 2017. Can you talk about that experience? Were you scared? What made you do it? And what were the results?
I think an important caveat is that I was someone who did it publicly. But as I've gotten into this field, I've realized that there are people doing gene therapy experiments fairly frequently. They just don't have any incentive to publicize them. So it's kind of crazy to think about how much is actually going on because we just have no metrics for it. I was a little bit uncertain, scared. I guess I was mostly concerned that it would actually work too well, but I would be allergic to the antibody that the treatment was trying to get my body to produce. We took a gene sequence from a human the NIH found was very good at controlling HIV. And they had figured out the gene sequence that allowed him to make this antibody that kept HIV in check. We were just taking that gene sequence, putting it into a plasmid, which is like a circular piece of DNA, combining it with something that helps it get into cells, and then injecting it. The first round, I didn't have high expectations, and it seems like it probably did nothing. But we kept working on it, and I ended up doing this like 4 times, I think, total for the HIV gene therapy. And eventually we reached the point of, okay, it does seem like it's producing the antibody, but it's not producing enough of it on its own to be a treatment by itself. And so, honestly, that project is kind of on hiatus because I think that it's going to take a combination of approaches together to be able to cure people of HIV. And it's frustrating personally because I think that the tools are out there. It's really a coordination problem of getting these different companies to work together on a high risk, high cost collaboration effort. And I really think that it's within reach. It's just Moloch really at this point.
And
So,
and I think DeSci is one of the DeSci's promise is to enable collaboration and cooperation between different stakeholders more effectively than the way it is now. So I think, fast forward 10 years, and now you're interested in extending the lifespan of canines. Let's jump into that because dogs are one of the gatekeepers for human trials, right? So you have a drug, they go into rabbits, mice, rabbits, different canines potentially, and also potentially non-human primates too, depending on the type of treatment. The point is, if we can extend dog life, can we extend human life with the same compound? So that's very interesting. I'll let you speak to the specific molecule, and if you have something to share, it'd be great as well.
I'll go ahead and pop those up right now.
So while
Um,
that's loading, I just want to let my Supercast members know this, what you're seeing now is Tristan's screen, and you'll be able to view his slides only to my Supercast subscribers. So thank you guys for your support. Go ahead, Tristan. Thanks.
Follistatin is something that we're already producing naturally, but we have it higher during puberty and when we're working out consistently. It inhibits myostatin, and myostatin is involved in the breakdown of lean tissue. And so the end result is that the body seems to metabolize fat and sugars more. It seems to stop eating its own muscle tissue. And then the end result is that you end up losing a little bit of fat, gaining a little bit of muscle. But it also seems like it might have some longevity effects. And so I helped run this study on a special economic zone in Honduras called Prospera. And we were mostly looking at healthy people of all ages. I participated myself as well. We were doing these like DEXA scans to look at body composition, but we were also looking at some other metabolic markers. We were looking at some longevity biomarkers as well. And what struck me was that 3 out of 3 of the participants that had arthritis stopped taking their medicine. And I was like, ooh, this is like one of those unexpected findings that could actually be very valuable. I ended up taking the treatment and giving it to my family's dog, Sky. And this was back around little less than
Oh,
2 years ago.
very cute
And
dog.
yeah, she's a big girl, almost 100 pounds. She was starting to deteriorate. Her hips were going out, and she was crying in pain at night. She was starting to decline, going on walks. And once they stop moving, it's just downhill, right? It's like they're just not going to be metabolizing and circulating, and it's just going to get worse and worse. But I figured, hey, like this is a great chance to test this out. Like, can it actually be helpful? I gave it to her, and it seems like it turned her around. Like the pain, crying stopped. Like she became more active again. And I think like a year later, she's starting to decline again. But I do think that added some months, if not a year, of life to this dog. And so that's great for the dog, but it's also great for me because now my family finally thinks I'm working on a real gene therapy.
How did you know how much to inject?
We used a pretty safe dosage for the humans, and since she's almost the size of a human, I just gave her a full human dose.
That's incredible that your family's dog, Sky, was able to get those benefits. How's Sky doing now?
She's definitely at the point where she was a year and a half ago, I think.
Would you re-administer the gene therapy?
I am certainly hoping to within the next few weeks, yes. So these vectors seem to last around a few months to maybe like a year or so. The idea is that you inject it into fat or muscle, and then those cells near the injection site are modified. And it's not changing the chromosomes, so it's not changing the progeny, like the cells that come afterwards. And so what you end up getting is kind of like a plateau of effect that starts to decline over the course of a year as those cells die out naturally. One of the important research questions is whether or not the body becomes kind of adapted to higher follistatin levels, because it seems like the first few months it's very noticeable, but then it kind of declines. And I think that maybe that's a chance to build up, maybe to reduce inflammation, and then maybe you kind of just are coasting off of those effects because the body is adjusted to the follistatin. But it also might just be that the follistatin levels are decreasing over the first 2 or 3 months. And so there needs to be more research done for sure. It's still pretty early. But the main objective with this research I'm proposing is trying to figure out which degenerative diseases that dogs are commonly experiencing are something that we can prevent, if not like delay or maybe even reverse a little bit. And so that's the main goal for this project I'm proposing.
Sounds like a really interesting project. Were you able to, in Sky's case at least, measure follistatin levels afterwards, like weekly or something, or was that just not in the cards at the time?
At the time, I wasn't in Florida. I can't say that Minicircle with the phase one did some in-house testing of the follistatin levels from participants at time point 0, 3 months, and 6 months. And according to those results, it does increase the levels to a level that is not something you would find naturally in humans. So it does seem like it is working, but you're totally right. We need to do it in canines and get higher resolution data. And for people who are following Minicircle, I think one of the biggest criticisms is that they haven't had a third party evaluate those serum levels of follistatin, which should be an easy win. I feel like if it's actually working, that's a great way of validating that your vector is doing what it's supposed to be.
It's a really fair point. I hope that they do that research. I think it's good for all of us to know that. Let's talk about the DAO. What is Dog Years DAO? There's many ways to structure a DAO, many reasons to have a DAO, and many reasons not to have a DAO. So let's talk about why you think it's a potentially a good idea for this specific use case, and how do you see it manifesting over the next few months and potentially years?
Yeah, there's a few ways that crypto can be helpful here, but the one I really want to focus on is the question of how do you get people to keep giving you data? And this is a problem with decentralized trials where you might get 30 people to sign up on your trial and you ship them the treatment, and then half of them just ghost you or don't respond, or they're just not motivated to give you data because it was free. And in their mind, it's like, oh, it's free. It's like, whatever, it's not important, right? So I've been thinking about a model where people put down a deposit and then they get most of that or all of that back once they submit their follow up data. And that's kind of like a way of defraying costs, right? Where you're putting the cost for the x-rays or whatever testing up front. That way you're not like, oh man, it's going to cost money to go to the vet. I don't really want to take the dog that much. I'm just going to ghost them. So if it's instead like, okay, I've already put the money in, I want to get that money back. And now like 12 months later, I think there's going to be a higher chance that they go to the vet. And this was actually inspired by a early crypto challenge where we had this like push-up challenge where We had like 30 people. Everybody put in like zero point 0.1 ETH, and that was only like $15 at the time. And every day we would post a video of ourselves doing 25 push-ups to a Telegram group. And if we missed 3 days over the course of a month, we would lose our stake. But if we did the push-ups, we would win a share of the stake of the losers. And so I ended up doing a bunch of push-ups and doubling my ETH. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a very effective way of getting a group to do something over time. And so I'm hoping to apply that model to decentralized trials as kind of a proof case.
I like that idea. I can even think of different ways to apply that for even more simple things. For example, if you're hosting an event, you have a free event. A lot of people get tickets to free events because there's no cost to having the ticket, just in case you want to go. But then you have 1,000 people expected to show up, but only 200 show up. You have all this extra food and planning. So it would make sense for the people to deposit $10, $100, whatever it is for the ticket event fee. And then if they attend, they check in, they'll get that money returned. Or potentially,
Absolutely.
if they provide some valuable data, maybe even get more than what they initially deposited. Who knows?
I also like the idea of the participants having stronger governance rights than just the investors. And I haven't formalized this yet, but I like the idea that maybe the people who have the token have to select a participant that completed the study as their representative for voting. And so that way, the participants in the study are the ones determining the fate of the project and what is happening with the collective data that we've all generated. I think what's an important thing to note is that this is a shift away from the IP NFT model of biotech DAOs. Most of the bio DAOs we've seen so far, the assumption of value has been like, we're going to make patents, we're going to somehow commercialize the patents, and then somehow that's going to cause the number to go up when we buy back the stock or tokens or whatever. I'm like no, like I don't think we need a patent in this situation because the markup for plasmids is just so effective. They're really not that expensive to produce. People will pay a good amount for gene therapy. Like you don't want a bargain cheapo gene therapy anyways, right? So I think there's value there that can be had without having to have the patent system. But then it's like, okay, we have this data set. How can we make this data set actually be valuable? And because there's a number of biotech startups working on follistatin treatments, I'm fairly confident that if we have a really high quality data set with dogs, we can potentially license that data out to those companies. Because those companies are in a similar position where they like, okay, it seems like the vector works, but we don't know which disease to target. And if you're a biotech company and you pick the wrong disease to target in your phase 2, you might screw the entire project over after that. So for them to be able to de-risk that process by saying, okay, well, we definitely know that it works really well in this arthritis or this other type of degenerative disease, I think there's a way of getting clear value for the DAO, and then from there going into how do we actually produce this and distribute it, which is another important question that DeSci is just starting to grapple with. I think HairDAO is starting to distribute products. I think VitaDAO had one supplement approved in Thailand. Maybe they'll keep expanding. But I think this is really the missing piece of like DeSci is like, okay, yes, funding, but can we do the science and can we actually distribute it to people? That's what's really exciting.
Right. And can we depend on the data that we're extracting from citizen scientists as well? I think that's one of the issues that many physicians or medical researchers have is, can we trust that data? Because in a typical clinical trial, the data and the environment is quite restrictive. How the serum is measured, the devices used, the location, all that is predetermined, and changing it could affect the statistical significance of the actual study. So no one wants to risk that. So you're going to have a lot of dogs in this trial to make it mean something. So how would the experience be? Let's say you know someone with an older dog. They're interested in Dog Years DAO. What would they sort of do? What's like the step-by-step process in your mind?
Yeah, there's like some sort of onboarding call. We collected the information about the dog. Plan A right now is to have a network of clinics across the country that you can go in to receive the treatment and then also do the follow up examinations and radiography. That's plan A. Plan B is we're going to mail it out to people and then they're responsible for going to the vet to get the data that we need for them to get their deposit back.
Just a question on mailing that out. Is it okay to mail out Follistatin to people without a prescription, I guess?
It really comes down to intent, and because everything is marketed as a dog treatment, I think the burden of liability would be complicated. But truthfully, I feel more emboldened about this like pathway because of the changes happening in the U.S. government right now,
Sure.
both from like a token issuance standpoint, and also from like just the regulatory environment. I think we're recognizing that the existing system was broken, and there's a lot of wiggle room for this. And I think that if it's done in good faith and it's like fairly reputably attached to at least some anchors, I guess it's not just like anime profile pictures shipping out gene therapies. I think it's high ground. I don't think it's
Mhm.
necessarily impervious, but it's like a moral high ground that I'm willing to fight on because I think that it's ridiculous. We're injecting animals with toxic doses of drugs at scale, and for them to be like, oh no, you're giving a treatment that's already done safety testing in humans, and you're giving it to dogs. That's terrible. It irritates me. One of the things facing me right now is applying to an IRB, an institutional review board, to get approval for this experiment. I'm almost certain they're going to be like, we need more animal studies, and it's just so frustrating because it's like we've already put it into like 45 humans in a phase 1 study. Like this is absurd to go back to the laboratory animals. It's time to move forward. I'm optimistic that I can actually find an IRB that's on board, but there's a chance that this will be more of an underground approach, which I'm fine with as well.
Yeah, and anyone listening to this episode as well and hears something that resonates with you and want to connect with Tristan, I'm going to leave all the information in the show notes. So please, I encourage you to get in touch with Tristan, especially if you can help make this a reality even faster. I do like the idea of having the dogs go to a clinic, like a vet, just because it'll bring more credibility to the study in general. I think it'll gain more traction and people will believe what's going on. And that's really what you want. So then more people can use it. And hopefully this becomes a normal routine drug that's given to dogs. Do you think that this is something that should be started earlier in a dog's life to extend life even further? I mean, you can talk about follistatin helping bodybuilders and potentially other sorts of humans. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are there. I know there's a lot of ethical questions around any side effects potentially that we're not aware of. And personally, I wouldn't do it, at least not right now, given the information that we have, the limited information we have. But I think I'm always keeping an eye on this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so some context. People have been injecting follistatin for, for like 10 plus years, but the half life is so short that you have to keep injecting it every other day, practically, in order to have an effect. And so that's why it's exciting about a gene therapy, where it's like, okay, we're just going to keep producing this in a durable amount of time. That being said, it seems like it reduces inflammation, but I don't know if it's going to actually fix or reverse arthritis, degenerative diseases, or maybe it just reduces the pain from them. So that's one of the big research questions that I'm hoping to figure out in this pilot study, looking at the x-rays. I went to a vet expo recently, and I found out that osteoarthritis in canines is largely not mediated by age. It is just wear and tear that's happening constantly through their lives. So even if the dog is only 2 or 3 years old, you can start to see some of the wear signs and you can track it. Maybe when they're 4 or 5, they might not have symptoms in that intermediary period, but because you can see it on the x rays, I think that it's still worth investigating. I think Right now, my current thinking is that this study will be open to canines that are 2 years and older.
That's great. Any specific breeds that you think you would want to target in the dog population? Because I know some, especially like golden retrievers, have been known to have hip problems as they get older. I'm curious if you're thinking in that way.
The larger dogs are more interesting to me. I think they're going to have more of a beneficial effect from this. Ones that you know that they're probably going to have hip joint issues, German Shepherds as well. Those are the ones that I want to see, like, okay, can we intercede before it gets bad and then just prevent it from ever getting to that point? That's really exciting to me.
Absolutely. Do you have a timeline? When do you envision Dog Years DAO to be launched?
We've started synthesizing the plasmid. Things are working on the back end. I'm hoping to have the token launch sometime in March or April, and then I'm hoping to start the actual experiment in probably summertime.
That's excellent. And for those that are listening, what's the best way for them to reach you? Is there a website yet, or should they just contact you for now?
By the time this is published, dogyears.club should be up and running. There's a mailing list on there, and eventually there will be a patient recruitment form up there as well. Lastly, there will also be information about the token event posted up there.
That's awesome. Any other details you want to share about the DAO? Any technical? I know that you're still developing the details around it, but just curious.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about going with BioXYZ versus just launching it independently. I don't think this is a huge fundraising lift. It's really not that expensive to run this study based on how I've designed it. So I'm sort of like weighing like the possibilities there. I think that it's great that they're doing so much, but it's also like, is this a centralizing force in DeSci, right? It's supposed to be decentralized. This is very seeming like a little centralized. So we'll see. We'll see. If they're open to not focusing on IP NFTs, then great, wonderful. I think it's time. I think this is just a part of a bigger problem of how do we collect data long term and how do we make claims about longevity. When I was working with Minicircle as the study coordinator, I was the chauffeur slash tour guide for these participants that were coming down to this tropical island for some exotic treatment.
And
And
just before you continue, so these people are coming from all over the world because the treatment doesn't exist in their own country. So they're going to Honduras to get this gene therapy. Brian Johnson was one of the participants.
Brian came after the phase one was completed, but yes, he also went down to the island as well. And yeah, this was mostly people from North America, a good range of ages, but they were almost all either our friends or they were really into fitness or really into longevity. And so I was like listening to these participants talk about all of the longevity clinical trials that they had been participating in because they were all sharing notes. They're like, oh, I like that one, or that one wasn't really that effective. And I was like, this is really cool to be hearing, but from a science standpoint, it's terrible because you're doing all these different treatments at the same time, and now we have to figure out which of these are synergistic, which of these are redundant. That's just a problem for humans because no human that's into longevity is going to be like, okay, I'm just going to do this one thing and that's it. Like, it's just ridiculous to even assume that's going to happen. So there has to be another way of studying longevity besides the double blind randomized placebo controlled study because it's just not practical. We don't have the time and the money to just focus on single interventions. So we have to figure out a way of collecting a bunch of data for a bunch of treatments and then pulling out of that data which of these was actually effective, which of these were synergistic, because otherwise it's never going to happen, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. When you have multiple interventions at the same time, you have all these multiple interventions a person is taking, it's hard to know what drug or treatment is impacting the person in what way. So all these confounding factors make the science almost a moot point. There's just garbage science. So I hear you there. It's so interesting.
Anecdotally, though, the best treatment that I heard like a advocation for was the plasma replacement. They took out 80% of his plasma and replaced it with synthetic plasma. He said that both like helped his epigenetic age substantially, but he just also felt amazing for a few weeks afterwards.
Who is this? Are you talking specifically, or is this the
Uh,
person?
yeah, I was just one of the participants in the
Okay,
study, but I think
got
Brian Johnson's been doing this treatment as well now too. He was like a year ago he took the plasma from his son, but just a few days ago I saw that he posted he's getting the synthetic plasma now.
Okay, yeah, I mean that to me that makes sense. The plasma, especially when you're taking it from a younger person with similar genes as you, I think that makes it really effective. Also, some people think it's kind of strange, but stranger things have happened in history, so it's not that strange actually.
Yeah.
Um, Tristan, this conversation has been awesome. Just kind of want to let our audience know what's the best way to reach you. And if there's anything else you want to let them know about, this is the time.
Yeah, there's a Telegram group on the website. You can email me wag@dogyears.club. Let's see what else is going on. Oh yeah, if there's like a longevity pop-up city happening both in San Francisco and then also in Honduras. The one in Honduras is like part of the special economic zone. It's called Infinitas after they kind of had like a breakup of Vitalia, which was like the original city, and that's so sad. I went there last year and it was like Vitalia forever, and then like the founders fought each other and then it split into two, and I'm like, oh no, Vitalia didn't last very long. It did not last forever. It's just such a like problem in the longevity space where it's like because the stakes are so small, there's only so many people able to get funding for their projects, and so there's a lot of competition, and it's just really sad because you can imagine like in 100 years, these are the only people who survive were the other longevity people. But if they all hate each other, then it's really going to be awkward at any of the social functions. So it's going to be complicated for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. We can solve for living longer, but we can't solve human conflict.
Yeah,
Just general
exactly.
human conflict.
So the one in
When is that
yeah, the
happening?
one in
Yeah.
Roseville, the August pop-up city. So highly recommend those events if you're looking for meeting new people.
Yeah, I'll be sure to include the links also in the show notes for those listening. I actually have a couple extra questions that wanted to send your way
Hit me.
here. They're I asked some of my guests this. Do you think the singularity is going to happen by the year 2040, which is, I believe, what the author Ray Kurzweil wrote about the future of AI? And so if we can go into detail about what the singularity
Yeah,
means,
exactly. I
kind
think it's
of a
already
little different.
happening. It's just there,
Hmm.
from our subjective perspective, there's not going to be a if we do not change our political and economic system, then all of these like good things that are coming from AI aren't going to be yours. They're going to be Sam Altman's and Microsoft's, and a lot of people are like really excited about, oh, we can use AI for drug discovery, and I'm like, that's not the problem. We have plenty of drug candidates right now. The problem is coordination and regulation. And if AI might be able to help with that, but it's not a linear problem. It's like and if we can somehow facilitate how we conduct science, how we distribute biomedicine, then we can actually be ready to receive the gifts of the singularity. Whereas right now, they might just get stuck in biomedical development hell. And then so we have all of these great treatments, but only like a very small amount of people are getting them. And I think this is actually one of the greatest risks facing us is like if these longevity treatments or super powerful AI are only available to a fraction of humanity, it's going to cause deep societal stress, if not fracture. So I'm of the perspective of like, you can have longevity and you can have Mars as a treat, but only after we fixed our economic and political systems, because until then, it's just going to perpetuate bad things, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Let's pay attention to the things that are immediately a problem. uh, that makes a lot of sense. Next question is, how do you like to stay healthy and fit?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question amongst the longevity people, right? And the answer is like I sleep a lot and I have a really good water purifier. Those are the two like such simple, basic, excellent, wonderful things. Like just
What kind of water
I've
purifier?
got a
I'm curious
Berkey
now.
with like a fluoride filter at the bottom too, so it's getting out pretty much everything, and I feel pretty good about that. In terms of like treatment, I mean, okay, so that being said, the other side of the equation is like I'm advising longevity companies, starting longevity companies, because I think that is the best way to have access to the treatments that are actually effective. And like honestly, I find like metformin and rapamycin to just be like a waste of time, effort, energy.
Hmm.
It's such a small difference. Like we really need the more dramatic treatments, and I think those are going to come from the maturation of gene and cell therapy. And specifically, I think that the combination of those two things is very underutilized. And so I could imagine like taking out some of your own stem cells, modifying them, and then re-injecting them being like one of the ways that we actually reach longevity escape velocity, this idea that we can like repair ourselves at the same speed as the decay from aging happens. And I don't think a pill's going to do that, honestly. I think it's going to take something like a gene therapy to do that.
Very interesting. And I wonder how like future generations will, um, be impacted by that. It's hard to even imagine. But it's very exciting stuff. I got to tell you, like what you're working on is truly at the head. You're a trailblazer. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for being so supportive in the community. One thing that a lot of people have criticized longevity people for, especially like Brian Johnson, is the amount of time and effort that they spend on trying to live forever. All these pills, regimented diet, and your day is basically pre planned and scheduled. Do you think that can impact their mental health? And I'm sure it does a little bit, but what's your thoughts on balancing mental health and the desire for living forever?
Yeah, I think there's like a deep stress that comes from trying to hang on to things. And I think that it's hard to quantify that, but the like resistance to alcohol or libations more broadly, I think is like a deeper, like mental, energetic issue of like clinging on to something that the more you cling, it's actually causing stress. It's actually causing inflammation. And so I think there is kind of a paradox there. When I first started hanging out with the longevity people, I started putting them on a spectrum of does this person love life or are they just afraid of death? And that's been very effective in navigating the longevity crowd because I think a lot of them are just afraid. And so when you're operating from a position of fear, you're not always thinking clearly. You're not, and that's what I'm concerned about is like these people who are just like, we need the accelerationist singularitarian technology to save us, but I'm like, at what cost, right? If you've enslaved yourself to some techno capital machine god, and now you live forever, but it's weird because you don't really have freedom and you don't really like there are some situations where living forever is actually really bad. And I wish that these people like really thought about that because it's possible to have a cursed existence where it might be better to be dead actually than being alive. So I encourage the longevity people to really think through what it would look like on the current trajectory if they did live forever and recognize that we're going to have to fight for that reality. It's not just going to be handed to us by the I think.
Yeah, no, that's really great points. And I am a person who often, I don't say often, but I do think about death as a intellectual, just because I think that there's so much that people avoid talking about when it comes to death. And I I get it, I get the fear, but also there's high interest for me in that area because it's like the great unknown, right? It's like the last thing we'll experience. So everything I'm learning about health and biotech and the life sciences um, sort of help to make the idea of death less scary to me. And I've also done many, mental exercises in terms of expanding my mind, let's say, and I've become much less afraid and more accepting. I think the idea is to accept life and accept death. I think the point of life is to experience everything you can, and within limits, I guess, or maybe without limits.
It's like amazing pop-up city experience, and there was like a longevity influencer that I admired that was there, and I DM'd him and asked if he would be down to get tea. And when I spoke to him in person, he's like, "Did you mean some sort of drug?" And like, what? That's hilarious because that would have been meth if anything. And anyways, but I was like, no, I was talking about hallucin. I wasn't talking about drugs. I was really talking about tea. But that opened up the conversation of like, have you done psychedelics? And he told me he has consciously decided to not do psychedelics because it might reduce his fear of death. And if he's not as afraid of death, he won't be as motivated to work on longevity. And therefore he might not live forever. And that just blew my mind because it was like, well, okay, you're right, but you're also wrong at the same time, right? Because like if you reach that level of acceptance, of understanding that death is part of the cycle, that like instead of being afraid of the
Yeah.
unknown and instead of like you're open to it, maybe those years that you were alive would be better, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think psychedelics can be helpful in many situations. They definitely are something that have been around history, society for a very long time. And when you said tea, I was thinking potentially ayahuasca or something like that, a tea. If you don't have any sort of reference, or if you're just jumping into ayahuasca from nothing, I think that would really terrify a person. But getting over that, it's sort of a reward too. But for that person, specifically not doing psychedelics, so he would be afraid of death. Okay. I mean, yeah,
I
everyone's got,
admire
like
his
it's a chat.
dedication.
Yeah, I admire it too. I admire it too. I admire all these like longevity guys, like tracking daily activity, diet, everything, all their supplements, measuring everything. Like that's a dedication that I don't think I don't have the energy to do personally. And I'm glad others are doing it for the sake of science. I know it's an N=1 in many cases, but you put enough of those people together, hopefully there's some insights. So what a great conversation. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this, make sure you follow, subscribe, share, leave a review on the podcast. Until next time, stay healthy, stay innovative, and keep your mind and ideas unchained. Thanks, Tristan. Hey, everyone. We would greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment to share your thoughts about the show by writing a review and rating the show on your podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach a wider audience and enhance the overall quality of the show. Don't forget to encourage your friends, mentors, teams, and students to tune in and subscribe as well. Thank you for your support. Check out healthunchained.org and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you enjoy podcasts. Join the premium Health Unchained Supercast community by going to healthunchained.supercast.com, which gets you access to ad-free episodes, and join the official Telegram community group for the latest updates.
Thanks, Ray. Stay healthy out there.